We are continuing in section number 46 on the Sermon on the Mount compared to the Sermon on the Plain. And we are now up to question number 268, which starts covering Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 and following. Okay, so we have here Matthew 5, 17 to 18 says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled." And so the question is, what was Christ's attitude toward the law? And since I have everybody muted, nobody can answer. Okay, I will just go through these. Okay, here we go. The answer is going to be B. He came to fulfill the demands of the law so we can be saved by his sacrifice. Now look at A there. He was a nonconformist who wanted to do away with the law so we can be saved by how good we think we are. Okay, that's a problem. We have to be careful to guard against this popular misconception about Jesus as a rebellious nonconformist. This is especially true a number of years ago, and it's still, I think it's still prevalent today in some of our modern entertainment-based churches. Perhaps in some misdirected way of enhancing Jesus and trying to make him relevant, they might be emphasizing the fact that Jesus was distinct from what was the established practice of his day. Being distinct does not make someone a nonconformist, though. We want to remember that Jesus does not need to be made relevant. Jesus is relevant no matter what. Now, stop and think about this issue of nonconformity. For leadership, now I'm talking about leadership now, wearing plaid, flannel shirts, and sneakers because it is different from what is perceived as standard religion, this signals an attitude and an outlook of being different just for the sake of being different. Our efforts should not automatically go to being different. You know, on the face of it, what we're doing is we're letting people know that we are generally disagreeable. We're signaling it right from the outset. Our attitude should be one of being thoughtful and discerning. That's what should characterize our attitude. Now, I mentioned that this was especially the case for when it came to leadership. Now, leadership, we want to remember that what we're doing is we are trying to always have a message that we're presenting. We're always trying to put forward something. Everything that we do speaks of what we're trying to say when it comes to leadership. Now, there are those who maybe their styles are kind of eclectic. Okay, and that's the polite way that people say that today. They're eclectic, but that's because some people truly are that way. They might have a particular kind of personality that's a little bit out there, and their styles reflect that. But whenever we want to try to see ourselves as bringing people to Christ in some kind of leadership, we want to make sure that what we're leading people to do is not follow and take notice of our different styles. Okay, we want to make sure people are focusing on Jesus Christ, and that's where we want to minimize. We want to decrease that Jesus Christ might increase. And so what happens is we've got to, for the sake of leadership, be able to take that kind of a stand. Now, some people say, well, leadership, you're saying leadership, pastor, you mean certainly Sunday school teachers and pastors, and then, well, maybe some others who present themselves as worship leaders, and that's what you're talking about. But no, actually, this ends up applying to all of us because we should all be trying to lead people to Christ. We should be trying to lead people to focus their attention on Christ. so that when it comes time to when we are in that moment, no matter what our personal tastes are, we want to be able to put those aside for the sake of helping somebody come forward. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy the other styles other times, but keep in mind that being different just for being different's sake draws attention to us rather than Jesus Christ. We should be thoughtful and discerning. Um, Sometimes that might make us differ from established thinking. That's true. But in reality, much of established thinking is established because it has stood the test of time and examination. There are many more times that being thoughtful and discerning affirms the old paths. If anything, the Pharisee and others were the nonconformers. They did not conform to the law as Jesus had originally established it when he gave it to Moses. Okay, looking at C, he taught us to fulfill the law so we can be saved. No, that is just the opposite of the truth. Jesus did not present the law to us as something we can fulfill for salvation. Now, that kind of statement will actually appear pretty regularly throughout all of our studies, because there might be a time, hopefully, that you'll be taking maybe this study guide and notes that you've established and written down, or maybe you've gone back to look at the videos and you want to share information with people. And this is an opportune time to point out to people that salvation is not by the law. Jesus came to fulfill the law. He does not say that we should fulfill it for salvation purposes. Now, Jesus did not say that he came to simply obey the law. Okay, he didn't come to obey the law, but to fulfill it. To fulfill it has the idea of perfecting the law or bringing it to its full purpose. The primary purpose of the law was to declare sin and its penalty. By going to the cross, Jesus fulfilled the penalty of the law. Okay, now most everybody, unless if you're a caller, most anybody can click on here and open up their mic and share anything. So please feel free to do so at any time. Don't feel bad about interrupting me.
Yeah, Pastor, I was going to say something. You mentioned something about like dress, for example. I was just thinking, like, a lot of times when I'm teaching my classes, we talk about, like when I'm giving like a speech class, your clothes convey a message. Whether you want to admit it or not, your clothes do convey a message. So, a pastor who's preaching a service inside of a church in sandals and shorts just to be hip and to be cool, I think really detracts from the somberness of and the seriousness of what God's message has for us. And I tell people, like, for example, when you go to a job interview, I'm talking about in a corporate company. I'm not talking about like a part-time job when you're a teenager. That's different. But if you're going for a career-related job, you're not going to go to the interview in shorts and sandals and a t-shirt. You're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
And just because you're wearing a suit doesn't make you qualified for the job.
Right.
But it does tell the person who's going to interview you that you are serious, that you're there for a purpose, and that you're there and you mean business. And I tell my students, if you go dressed up in shorts and a t-shirt and sandals, there's going to be one word on the interviewer's mind, and that's going to be next.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So I'm sorry. I was just getting back to what you were saying, that okay, so people wear suits to church, and people think, well, you don't have to wear a suit to church to be, but the point is that we're not there to impress people, but we're there to impress upon people that we're serious about what we're doing here, and our clothes do convey a message.
Yes, yes. And I'm going to throw in speech and things that we talk about, things that we laugh at, all kinds of things like that. But this is a good opportunity for me to remind you of a story, from years ago when we were first here at the church, and we had it was going to be a Sunday evening service, and some of the old leadership of the Old People's Baptist Church was coming to see us and check us out a little bit, and I was really quite nervous. And Nancy and I sat down and we talked about the message for that evening, and came with a message dealing with details, paying attention to details, the importance of details. And Nancy said to me, she said, "Now do this one thing," and she had me unbutton my top button and loosen my tie just a little bit. And I preached the whole message through, and I got to the end of the message, and in order to actually make the whole point of the message, I asked everybody, said, "Now, how many of you noticed my button and tie?" And they all smiled and they all raised their hand. And the point was that the details made a difference, and it had served as a distraction for the whole message, but it was a distraction in order to make the point. And all of this goes to the issue again that Jesus was not interested in trying to be unique and different. He was different because he is holy, not because he was trying to set some new fad or have some kind of there's a phrase for it, a differential advantage. That's what companies do. They want to set something up that's different about themselves, and so they try to portray themselves as unique in such a way. Jesus did not have to do that. What he did do was he was different enough just by bringing people back to the intent of the Bible. So nonconformists, that we do, we really encourage people to take notice of that, because there's a lot of that out there in church as people trying to be different just for different sake and to be nonconformists. It's a very popular mistake to make. Okay, I'm going to go on to question number 269. 269 is based on verses
Pastor, I just wanted to make a final point on that, actually.
Go right
if
ahead.
you don't mind.
No, please do.
I just remember I've gone out on the street and given out tracts like a number of times when we've done that, either as a church or just on whatever. And one thing I do remember in particular was when the Bayonne used to have the street fair in all along Broadway. I remember one Sunday I went out right after service, so I was still dressed, for church. I guess it was in May, so I guess it was, a pretty warm day, but I was wearing my suit. And I noticed that when I was giving out tracts, the reaction of people was different than if I had been when I was wearing jeans or t-shirt or, whatever the weather, depending on the weather or whatnot. I just noticed they seemed to take it a little bit more seriously. They were like, oh, this, he must, I don't know if they thought I was a minister or something. I really don't care about that. But there's just something about, again, that your clothes do communicate a message. And I'm not suggesting that we always have to wear a suit when we go out and give out tracts, but I am saying that message gets conveyed. People will take things a little bit more seriously when they see something behind where the message is coming from.
Amen. Okay.
Pastor?
Yes, Brother Tone, go right ahead.
I just want to add that in the answer that you gave, the fulfillment there may also be seen as Jesus being the Word, explaining the difference between literal and spirit. And he as an example, he talked about the Sabbath, what it really means in spirit, and he's the Lord of the Sabbath. Another example would be the adultery. To the Pharisees, it's just the material, the carnal that they see, but then to him, it's the heart where it sits all passions. And he said, the one who lusteth after a woman, not his wife, already commits adultery. Yeah. So that's how he fulfills it. And obviously, the last one would be the salvation message of the ceremonial law. Was just a prelude, the foreshadowing of what he would eventually come. Amen. And perform for the whole mankind. That is salvation through going through the cross, and again on the third day rising up. Amen. And so these are the things that the Pharisees were not conscious of. They were just interested in including the tithing. The tithing, for example, he explained that you're only interested. You are very meticulous about pounds and weights and so on, not neglecting other things that are more important, which are doctrines. So
Yes.
so Jesus, by appearing himself as the Word, completes everything, and why we should be listening to him. I mean, the Jews then should have been listening to him as per Moses' own prophecy that a prophet like, I mean, greater than he is coming, and they should listen. The Jews should listen to him. They didn't listen.
Yeah, exactly, right on point. In fact, we're going to be getting shortly around to the thing about, well, one of the passages about adultery in just a little bit also. Okay, let me read Matthew 5:19-20. He says, "Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousnesses of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." Okay, notice A, it was good to break the law down into minute requirements like the Pharisees did. No, not at all. In fact, let me give you the answer. The answer is, of course, going to be C. The law was important, but it was not limited to a mere Pharisaical outward observance, which is exactly what Tone was just referring to. Okay, so by referring to the fulfilling of the jot and tittle, these were two small markings in Hebrew writing. Jesus was not saying that there were hidden meanings beyond what was written in the law. The key phrase here is like the Pharisees did. Okay, he did not. He was not saying it was good to break the law down to minute requirements like the Pharisees did. He was referring to the absolute application of the law, most specifically in his fulfillment in the demands of the law. And again, that's let me just point out that's what Tone was referring to also there. Okay, B, there would be no more use for the law after Jesus came? No, Jesus did say there was. Jesus did not say that there was no use for the law. In fact, he affirmed the benefit of the law. Well, there's a twofold benefit of the law. The first one is the one that we go by mostly, which is conviction for the lost. Okay, by the law is the knowledge of sin, but it's also a blessing to the believer. Jesus had been teaching that the Pharisees' search for meaning between the lines of the law had led them into a different self-righteousness. Okay, so they were depending more on their application of their interpretations. The righteousness that we need goes beyond that in nature, where we obtain the righteousness of Christ through salvation. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 20-21 says, "Now then we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God did beseech you by us. We pray you in Christ's stead, be ye reconciled to God. For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him." So what we need is something that goes beyond what they had. We need our very nature to be changed, not an adherence to their interpretations by reading in between the lines of the law. Okay, we go to this next section. Having peace with your brother. And there are a number of things here. Let's see how far we can get with it. Try to go till about 1:15 so we can pray, have our prayer time. Question number 270. Things change a little bit here. It's based on Matthew 5:21. He says, "You have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment." Okay, and the answer is going to be A, you will have to face the judges. Okay, what was a simple application of the law concerning killing? You'll have to face the judges. And that's what he's saying there. It was said by them that whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. Well, Look at B. It says you will have to be killed. Well, no, not every killing is subject to the death penalty. The commandment to not kill is a reference to murder. Ordinarily, such a case would simply bring someone before an inquest to determine what should be done. And as in C, only in some cases restitution would be made, but not necessarily so. But for A, you will have to face the judges. Jesus presented the simple case, and he's doing this as an opportunity to go after a deeper problem in the heart. So he starts off with talking about the simple case. Not everything can be covered by simple legal procedures, however. All things that go on in a person's heart cannot be covered by the law. Even when the motivation behind a killing can be judged, that does not mean that everything that is in the heart has been actually dealt with. Sometimes you might be able to deal with the motivation, but you're still not getting everything. Jesus goes on to discuss this heart problem as it appears before or even in the absence of an actual killing. In other words, what's the heart attitude that leads up to the killing? Or it could be even in the absence of a killing. Maybe the killing doesn't actually take place. Excuse me. Okay, so that brings us to question 271, and that is, what is the relationship of anger to killing? Now, this whole passage is a little bit good to make sure to look at, because there are some phrases here about saying fool and raka and this and that thing. We'll explain those as we go along here. So what is the relationship of anger to killing is the question. Matthew 5:22 says, but I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. And so we'll be seeing those here. Raka and fool and being angry. Okay, so what is the relationship of anger to killing? Well, let's look at C first. See, there are times when righteous indignation is appropriate. So when it says anger is never justified, so you should be condemned for being a killer. No, there are times when anger is justified. Jesus points out without a cause here. So there are times when righteous indignation is appropriate and should be distinguished from unjustified anger. Now, having anger is not as bad as killing. Well, as far as judgment on earth is concerned, not every sin carries the same penalty. Since God judges the heart, the same nature that could kill, though, is the same nature of the man who wants to kill. Many people see the inconsistency between a hate crime and a regular crime. I always ask, what kind of crime is committed out of love? If I come in and I steal something from your house, I guarantee it's not because I love you. It's because I am disdaining you, and it's definitely not a crime of love. Well, now, generally, people who commit murder, I think they're generally doing it out of hatred. Okay, so, but you look at A. It says here, you might have the heart of a killer. Now, again, in the case where there are times when there are other killings like self-defense, etc., and things like that, when killing is actually quite justified. But someone who has an unjustified anger, well, they might not face an earthly council, but he will not escape the judgment of God. All that would be missing is the actual killing. So someone who has that kind of anger could be brought before God. Okay. Question 272. What might you deserve if you slanderously call someone Raka? Okay, Raka means essentially stupid. Okay, so that was from the previous verse there. Being Raka would possibly bring a lawsuit before the council. Not the death penalty. Being disagreeable and in opposition to someone is a case where someone's motivation might rise to the problem of being a murderer in one's heart, though. So they might actually be deserving something if it's bad enough. Okay, but look at C, as shaming on social media. What might you deserve if you slanderously call someone raka or stupid? Maybe a shaming on social media. Well, that might actually be worse than being brought before a court. A court is required to render a responsible judgment. Social media carries all the prejudices and pettiness that is just as bad as the slanderer that is being judged. In fact, in the faceless and anonymous climate of the internet, a shaming on the internet could reach proportions in which it is as bad as a murderer. Okay, but typically, B, as lawsuit before the council, slander might be also be demonstrated in a public venue, but a council is limited to what is done in public as to what can someone can be charged with, and so you might be brought before the council. Okay, now we come to question 273. Why would someone who arrogantly determines that someone is a fool or a moral reprobate deserve the judgment of hellfire? And that's the problem here. Rocco was just simply calling somebody a fool. It was a case of slander. However, the word for fool here was more serious in Greek, and it had the idea of being a moral reprobate. Well, A says, look at A first. It says, because it's not nice to call someone a fool, okay, and that's why they deserve the judgment of hellfire. Well, no. One of the greatest sins that you would think, though, from looking at our modern culture is to offend somebody by calling them a name. Of course, some of the worst offenders are those who scream the loudest about being offended. For instance, people like Candace Owens and Larry Elder and others have been called coons and Uncle Toms by the supposedly social conscious progressives that they oppose. And so those that would scream the loudest could be the loudest criers of calling people names. A number of years ago, someone called me a white man. They were not referring to the obvious. Now, they were making a very sharp and biting argument, but it was an argument that was being made. They were exercising their free speech, and I was not offended by it. This does not mean that we should feel free to be rude and obnoxious, but people should not be so quick to cancel others and seek to ruin their lives over name calling. Sometimes name calling is as a specific thing that carries a lot of weight to it in an argument. I just don't recommend this being so free to do that. You've got to be very judicious in something like that. But B says, because judging others is forbidden, is that why someone deserves hellfire? Well, no, judging others is not something forbidden, but we're actually going to discuss that when we get to Matthew 7. Well, C, because they demonstrate that they don't understand the grace of God. That is the correct answer. Because it recognizes a principle that is used elsewhere about not being merciful or forgiving. If you can wish the judgment for a reprobate on someone who has not actually crossed the line into being reprobate, then that demonstrates that you do not understand the grace of God. You only are thinking in terms of retribution. You're only thinking in terms of works and payment. This is especially true since we can never really know if someone is reprobate or not. We might suspect it, but there are some people who fill all kinds of qualifications for reprobation that are given in the scriptures, but end up getting saved and becoming great servants to the Lord. Before wishing hellfire on someone, which they deserve if they really are that bad, one should consider what it is that they themselves deserve. Such a vindictive attitude demonstrates a lack of understanding grace. And if you don't understand grace, you are in danger of hellfire. Okay, question 274. What should you do if you know someone has a problem with you? Well, Matthew 5:23 says, therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, you're supposed to leave your gift there. In fact, I'm missing a part of a verse. Let me add that on. Leave there thy gift before the altar and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Okay, so the answer is going to be A, hold off on serving God and try to settle the problem with him. Don't keep trying to go forward serving God while you've got a problem with your brother, in other words. Let's look at C. It says nothing. Such people don't deserve to be forgiven. Okay. C demonstrates a lack of understanding of grace, which is needed for a Christian society. The law gave the limitation of judgment in Leviticus 24, verses 19 to 20. And if a man cause a blemish in his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he hath caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. I always like the character Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, and he points out the problem with the lack of understanding of grace. He said, very good, that way the whole world will be blind and toothless. Now, it is not rational that someone you have offended should need to be forgiven. But if they are not willing to forgive, then there is there's a different kind of problem that needs to be dealt with, holding a grudge. Sometimes B, keep on serving God and hope that the person gets over his problem with you. Well, sometimes problems do have a way of resolving themselves, but we must recognize that not all things will, and we've got to be ready to do the right thing, even if somebody has not approached us. A, if we have offended somebody, then we should not just go on with life, even serving God, until someone chooses to confront us. If one of us suffers, then all of us are actually suffering. 1 Corinthians 12, verses 24 to 26 says, for our comely parts have no need, but God hath tempered the body together, having given more abundant honor to that part which lacked, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. And whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it, or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. If it's within our power to reach out to someone who is truly offended, we should do it. If we have offended them, we should try to reach out to them. It might not always be within our power to do it, but merely feeling bad does not necessarily mean an offense has actually been committed. Something that would not count is someone who feels bad because we shared a painful truth with them. Just because we made them feel bad does not mean that we've offended them. But if we have, we should try to make sure to settle things. Question 275, and we're going to squeeze this question in to end this part here. What should a believer try to do with their adversary, that is the person who is at odds with you? This is based on Matthew 5, 25 to 26. He says, agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto you, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. So you want to make sure to get things taken care of before it gets taken too far, even to a court of law. Okay, look at the answer going to be C. Come to a friendly agreement with him before the problem escalates into something more serious. But notice A, ignore him and hope the problem disappears. Well, again, there are times when a problem is not really a problem and should be left alone. But this does not apply to a case where someone is not an adversary. If it's an adversary, you should definitely make sure to take care of the problem. Okay, B, take him to court before he takes you to court. Well, especially for Christians, matters should not be taken to a court to decide. Humble spirits will value the importance of forgiving and moving forward. We should be quick to do this, especially in light of how much we can overlook at work in order to get our jobs done. At work, we might have to be willing to totally ignore a disagreeable coworker. How much more should we be able to be forgiving at church? C demonstrates the importance of being able to catch problems early before things get out of hand. We are also admonished that we should not be bringing our problems before the world to judge, that we should be judging them ourselves.